Yes, absolutely. Not long ago, my friend Janai asked me, and I was like in a particularly angsty time in this spiritual abuse world.
Mhm,
When you see all the things and it just can get overwhelming and
mhm,
my own responses and my own feelings that were like inside of me. And she just said, "Do you like who you are becoming?" And it was such a
mhm,
powerful question to me. And I think it's really important for us to ask that question for those of us that care about people that have been harmed,
mhm,
particularly in faith environments, because it's a worthy cause.
mhm, mhm,
But along the way we move and live in these spaces forms us.
mhm.
And we do have some choices in how we handle entering into and retreating from some of these spaces. And I just wonder, how have you experienced that personally, for better or worse? And what have you learned that you would like to share? This could probably be a whole month of podcasts.
Oh
Who are we
gosh.
becoming? And what have you learned from like living and moving in these spaces? I know you are a thinker and like to think through your answers, so take whatever
Yeah.
time you need to think
No,
about it.
thank you. It's sort of jumping right in, isn't it? The When abuse mars who you are, it fractures it, it deforms it, actually, trauma, abuse of all sorts. Victimization, label it however you want to, whatever seems to fit what has occurred. And it causes you to question who you are, what you thought, what you understood about yourself, the world around you. Your entire worldview is altered and changed. In fact, there's evidence to suggest that your DNA is changed by trauma. And so the expression of who we are is very often highly shattered and fragmented and disordered even. And so the recovery process, and I've talked about this on a couple of spaces that I've been privileged or invited into, is a sort of a three-tiered or three-stepped continuum. And the first step of recovery, and you didn't ask this, but in order to answer it, I got to go through this to get there, is establishing safety and stability. This is from the work of Judith Herman, and is establishing safety and stability in the present. That's physical safety, emotional safety, spiritual safety, um, so that the harm will not continue, whatever that is. And it's not just, can I go in behind in my bedroom and lock my door? Am I physically safe? It's also, am I safe on social media? Am I safe emotionally, where I don't have to interact with people I don't know how to interact with yet, or I can't handle interacting with? Am I safe from my offender and the influences in that network? Those sorts of things. And establishing safety and stability. Am I safe for myself?
Yeah.
Is my family safe? Am I safe in my family unit? Because trauma usually upends the entire family unit, and that can take a long time to establish safety and stability. I think that people try to move forward into advocacy,
Mm.
um, in a public way, before they're even safe and stable. And
Mhm.
I think that's really a way that we can re-victimize ourselves as survivors. And it certainly is a way that we can destabilize others unintentionally.
Yeah.
And then the second phase of recovery that Dr. Herman talks about is grieving and remembering, mourning, and how mourning is mourning who you were, mourning what's happened, mourning that this is the world that we live in,
Yeah.
mourning the systems, mourning the structures, mourning the losses, mourning the things that were, the things that weren't, the things that now will never be.
Yeah.
Um, and you can fill in the blank with hundreds, if not thousands, of costs that come, the things that need to be mourned. And oftentimes that's a therapeutic process involving a helper, hopefully somebody who's registered and accountable to an organization. But it can also involve a therapeutic community like the survivor community. And I think we can be good at helping each other grieve, mourn, remember, and validating our experiences. Um, and the goal here is sort of the goal of grieving and remembering is to restore a sense of agency and
Mhm.
to diminish the terror and the of submission, of having to submit, whether it's spiritually, sexually, physically, financially, um, you name it. There's all sorts of dominance and submission that come into abuse and tyranny. But the whole goal of grieving and remembering is to name those experiences, to grieve those experiences, to label them, to assign shame as the perpetrator, not the victim. And then also the whole goal of that time frame is actually empowerment, right? Is to take back power from those who stole it and
Yeah.
return it to the person, your own human, your own dignified uh, individual, and restore that sense of agency that you can actually affect change in your own life. You can do the things of life
Yeah.
and recover. And the third phase of recovery is actually reintegration back into who you were and who you are now. And we often think that mourning will never end. Like it'll always be in this intense therapeutic process, and that's actually not accurate. It feels like that at the time, but mourning does come to an end, and moving into an expansion and deepening of relationships does occur with yourself and with others. And in reintegration, there's new possibilities in life. There's new podcasts,
Yes.
right?
Friendships, new conversations. Yes.
New conversations to be had, new relationships to be formed, and new possibilities in life. And then the fourth thing that Dr. Herman has recently talked about in her new book on truth and repair is justice. And so as a fourth phase. And I think justice is actually intermingled through all the other phases. And that's where, trauma is a social problem and it needs a social solution.
Oh,
That,
yeah.
yeah. So, and this is part of the social solution.
Yeah.
I would say that we need to be careful not to take our pain and move it rapidly through the phases of recovery and move right into reintegration. Okay, that hurt.
Yes.
Yeah, it sucked. Yeah, and now I have a story to tell. Without having done the deep and hard and wide and vast work of establishing and keeping safety, not
Yeah.
just establishing it once, it's not a one time deal, and mourning, remembering, and grieving and meaning making,
Yeah.
so that you know who you are and you know how you got there. And that's not to victim blame in any way, but you know the pieces of your own puzzle that made you vulnerable in those situations.
Yeah.
To be human is to be vulnerable, but we all must understand our own vulnerabilities, understanding where we have power and how would we use that. Offenders are people who very often feel very powerless, but they exert extensive power, and they do so in a really destructive way. And so and then we talk about justice, and what does justice look like,
Yeah.
and how can we partner with ourselves and other people to bring about justice. And I don't think that we define that well. And as we're moving through the traumatic process, and as I've moved through that traumatic process, and that, I mean, I think this is year 8 for us.
Yeah.
I'm well into reintegration. Um, and I have learned things the very, 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 very hard way.
Yes.
Uh,
Do we have
uh,
to learn it the hard way?
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
I am a reader, and so as I was moving through what was for us a catastrophic event and series of events that was protracted over a long period of time, I did find in the faith space, in the religious space, there wasn't much in the way of resources
Yeah.
at the time. Now that has gladly changed.
Yeah.
That's only in an 8-year sphere. Jules Woodson took it on the chin first and went forward in that faith sphere. Our events predated her, and so then since then, and Emily Joy and her companion that came forward also exploded that space, and they spread around courage to be shared,
Yeah.
and courage is the best contagion. So I just wanted to frame our conversation in that context,
Yeah.
because
I like that.
I think it's really difficult to talk about where do we want to go from here if we
Mhm.
don't know that There's a foundation that needs to be built in order to even be here in the first place.